everyone, Brian the Brain here, and it is week 3 of Creature Feature Month, and I'm really excited to review this one with Jerome because this is a movie we both have never seen, and going into this, I know Jerome was a little iffy about it. I was somewhat iffy about it as well. It turns out it's a little fun, a little more fun than we thought it was going to be. So, Deep Rising, 1998, week 3 of Creature Feature Month here at Pantheon Plus. But first, if you can leave us a 4 or 5-star review for the people at the Real World, so more people find this show and all the other shows in the Real World and all the work we're doing there. It helps the algorithm, helps us out a lot. But Jerome, this week, I don't know. I thought this movie was going to be something else, and then it turns out the script was actually pretty fun. Like, not great, but fun. And it just kind of sucks that they didn't kind of fully, figure out the creature fully. Kind of feels like they kind of short-ended the stick on that one. But other than that, I think the premise and the whole concept of this movie is really fun. Giant monster attacking a cruise ship, and you know what? The gore is actually pretty out of there, like out of nowhere. To be honest, I didn't expect so much gore in this movie. And Jerome, we had skeletons being spewed out, melting bodies, and somehow this all connects to King Kong, which I'll relate to later.
Yeah, I have to say that in terms of looking at the 4 movies that we reviewed, this is the one that I had the most questions about. But I think this is a solid B movie. I think this is a movie that knows exactly what it is. It delivers on the premise, and I think those are the things that you want. I think the performances are perfectly calibrated to the type of movie that this is. I think you've got a great crew of character actors up and down. I mean, there's no real big stars in this, but you have a lot of people who've done a lot of movies. They played that guys. They've been like secondary villains, secondary heroes. They've done a lot, but I'm really satisfied with this movie just in terms of what the premise is, how it delivers that premise, and I think that you can see how the number, you can see how Stephen Sommers went from doing this to then doing The Mummy. Like there is a logical step-by-step process that I'm witnessing here. And I think I would certainly, based on this movie, be like, yes, you should direct a Mummy movie with a bigger budget and bigger stars. And you could see the maintenance there. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. This is not a classic, but I would definitely watch this again if given the opportunity, which I'm not sure I would have bet on before the month.
For sure. And originally this was like a Blu-ray that was really hard to find, like maybe 5-6 years ago before a re-release of it. So I think that's, I think it's available now, like easily to find. But man, like it used to be like one of those 2-pack Blu-rays that, it would be a bullshit movie in this one. So, I'm glad it's finally gotten the proper release because it deserves it. Like I was shocked at like how I'd never seen this movie before, only heard about it like in like word of mouth and like, it's not even in the top list of like creature features, you know what I mean? And I'm surprised, because I guess it's because of the CGI that doesn't hold up, which kind of throws people off towards the end, which kind of threw me and Jerome off, to be honest. Like that was the one thing that we were kind of like disappointed about. But 1998 CGI, it's like, what can you do? You know what I mean? You had I kind of had some of those minor complaints about the CGI in The Mummy, but overall, I think The Mummy is well executed. In this case, this movie's not totally well executed because of the CGI, and we'll talk about why in the budget. But overall, I think the script that he put together is pretty good. Like Stephen Sommers was working at Hollywood Pictures in the 90s. So having that kind of relationship at the company, developing the script, they saw that he can potentially make a budget or a big box office hit for them, even though this movie was a total flop. But, he tried because he made the script with Harrison Ford in mind. So if you got that, with that note in mind, it's clear that this character played by Treat Finnegan, excuse me, it's clearly a knockoff of a Han Solo type, and he's quoting Han Solo, which is fine. Like a lot of the movies that are paying tribute to Han Solo nowadays do that.
What I would say is Harrison Ford in 1998 would actually be a terrible choice to play Finnegan. Treat Williams was the right person for the job at this point.
So the problem is with that is you lose money on the budget because you don't have a big major star now, and that's kind of what happened with the production of this one. Now we talked about Hollywood pictures before. We talked about Encino Man, and I believe the Mario movie. It's an offshoot of Disney, one of their other companies that they can release PG-13 R-rated movies under that banner. They did that in the '90s and 2000s. Unfortunately, they just couldn't get the right pieces together for this, I guess. But in terms of like the budget when it comes to the effects, I think the cast is good because like I think a good thing that happened is that Claire Forlani, who I know from Mallrats, you know her from Mallrats, other places. She just doesn't seem the right type for this movie in terms of the role that Femke Janssen was playing, Trillian St. James. Because that role is very much like almost like a Bond girl, and she was a bad Bond girl in Goldeneye, so that fits more for me. So I'm kind of glad that kind of switch happened because I just can't see Claire Forlani in this role at all. Like it just doesn't fit. So and the fact that they shot with 3 days and they just kind of realized that it didn't work, perfect because I can clearly see that not working right off the bat. But I think Femke Janssen, even though I think the role that she's playing is kind of like it's not really a needed role. It's just a love interest role, unfortunately, which Stephen Sommers kind of said that on set. Like you're the love interest. Unfortunately, you have to kind of be pretty all the time. So that's one of those '90s things, you know what I mean? And that's kind of unfortunate. But she did a solid job for what she did. It just seems like she was taking a paycheck in certain scenes. But by the end, when she was doing like the action sequence stuff, she was really getting into it. So that was kind of cool. Like she kind of got into it by the end. But at the beginning, it just kind of feels like she's a fish out of water, which is very strange because she doesn't really fit into the plot at all. She's just literally sneaking on the ship and just sticking around trying to rip rich people off. So that's kind of her background. But yeah, like we mentioned, a lot of references to Han Solo, and specifically using the piece of junk line, which I use all the time with my friends in the most random times, and they always pick up on it, calling like their car a piece of junk, or we go to a hole in the wall joint and like this looks like a piece of junk. So yeah, that phrase is really in tune with me or ingrained in me. Same thing with a bad feeling because once Treat Williams said that multiple times, I'm like, okay, you're definitely doing the Han Solo, and I'm loving it. So, and you mentioned the cast being like a bunch of like character actors that it's like, oh, it's this guy and this guy. But I wanted to point out Cliff Curtis. Now, Cliff Curtis, you just saw him in Meg 2. He was in Avatar 2 as well, Way of Water. But if you look at his filmography, he loves filming in the water, apparently, because not only you got this movie, Virus came out a year later, which I've seen, and it's a terrible movie with Jamie Lee Curtis, but that whole thing takes place on a boat, and it's got a lot of water in it on the ocean, so you got that. He was also in The Fountain. He was also in River Queen, and he was in the first Meg movie. So Cliff Curtis in the water is just kind of a natural thing now at this point, I feel. It's not really a typecasting. I think it's accidental, but Jerome, I just find it funny that when we were talking off air, you remember him as that random terrorist, the Collateral Damage. I remember him as Pablo Escobar, but somehow he ends up in these monster movies that pay off at the end for him because he seems to like enjoy making them. I don't know. What do you think?
Here's the one thing I'll say about Cliff Curtis. I think he does a noble job in every role that he's in. I think in very, very often because he is a brown person, and I'm not saying using that colloquial term to dismiss him, but what I'm saying is that unfortunately what ends up happening is that he is ending up in a situation where he is playing Hispanics, where he's playing Indians, where he's playing just these homogenous, racially, it's really weird. I don't like it. I think we hopefully can get away from that. And I know that he is from New Zealand, but it just sucks, man. It just really sucks that he ends up being in these random roles. But I mean, look, if he's on the Avatar track, then that is somebody who's going to be collecting a nice paycheck from one Mr. James Cameron for a number of years. So that's good. I want him to get all the money, and he is a very solid character actor, and he's very good in this role too. And you know what? Here's the thing about Famke Janssen. I think Famke Janssen is one of those people who it seemed like their career was going to really take off because, like, she was in Goldeneye, she did the X-Men movies. She doesn't really get a lot to do as Jean Grey in X-Men 1 and 2, and then she dies at the end of 2. she's the big bad in The Last Stand, which is really not a good movie, and then she kind of disappears. And I know that she has done, like, she was in The Faculty. She did Hemlock Grove, one of the first Netflix shows, but her career never really took off. And I look at this movie and I think there was some potential there for her to be in something interesting. And what I would like to see for Famke Jensen is like what Rebecca Romaine Stamos, who was Mystique in X-Men, also did not get a lot to do, but like now she is the number one on a Star Trek TV series, and I would love to see the same thing happen for Famke Jensen's. Because I think she deserves more love than she gets, especially being in GoldenEye, being in the X-Men franchise. I think she's pretty solid, and I think she's pretty solid here. One of my favorite things about her character is she's in a red dress at one point, and then she changes into more practical clothes. Props to that. You don't see that in 90s movies. She dresses practically, and I very much appreciate that.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I thought that was like, I was like, wow, this seems way like advanced for the time for someone to do that. But because look, we saw the complaints about the Jurassic World stuff with the heels, so it would have been like that. Thank God she changed the dress because I guess look, you can't be wearing a red dress in the water like that. It's just too much. You're trying to get away with a PG-13 rating. Well, they tried. It ended up with an R because of all the cussing. So yeah, that was another problem too. Is like this movie has a lot of like you can kind of see some of the ADR issues where they're trying to layer over some lines for the dialogue, and it looks like it doesn't match because they try to make this into a PG-13 movie. Apparently, they try to cut it down to from the R stuff and all the F bombs and stuff, but they just couldn't do it, so they just left it as R. So that's why if you kind of see some, I know this one scene with Treat Williams, and it didn't match, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? The audio was like so much deeper and it sounds like it's in a different room. So there was some audio issues there that I noticed, but that's only because, again, similar with Tremors, it's like they don't just, don't mess with it. You're going to make it worse. And I think in some instances, they made some of the scenes worse in terms of the sound quality. But other than that, you know what I mean? We talked about those budget issues. Rob Bottin, who worked, on the thing, and he's a legendary special effects guy. Here's the issue with me is like, they brought him on board to do practical stuff, but once the budget got cut down, which I mentioned, that's when they're like, oh shit, we might have to do just like CGI and do it cheap, and we can't really afford to do these practical effects. But what they could do on, what they were able to do on set, I thought, it was creative, like especially the scene where I texted you this, where it's like the monster's like under the water, but the water is like underneath this metal grate, and it's like a walkway. So as soon as the monster goes through it, it shoots up the metal grates, kind of like in Tremors, right? When they're doing the underground thing, and it's like that wooden plank sidewalk next to the store, and you see the plank just shoot up. Well, I guess it was the same thing in the thing. We just forgot it because they did the exact same shot of the thing. So that was kind of like a homage to the thing. And my thinking was, oh, they were just kind of ripping off Tremors, but it was really a homage to the thing. So that was pretty cool. I just wanted more of that practical effect kind of thing, but all they can really do is like have blood spurts here and there, and then have like fun with the gore a little bit and have some practicality with the gore, because when they do show the gory stuff, it's like they did have actual skeletons and put makeup on the skeletons and make it like ooze and stuff like that and all that kind of thing. And then of course a questionable makeup job on the guy that falls out of the worm, which we'll talk about, but that was pretty brutal. But overall, I think they tried, but because of the budget cut, they just couldn't execute the effects the way they wanted to, which really holds the film back from being like a true, like I think Tremors is like a level above this. It just didn't get to that level, but I think the script is really fun. So I think that's what it's the strong point of it. And yeah, I mean, this movie grossed $11 million on a $45 million budget. And with that budget cut, they also cut out the special effects opening that was going to be like this big open water sequence, and they just kind of changed it with like an underwater camera. And I was just like, oh, they went kind of cheap with the opening sequence here. But, it is what it is because of the budget. So it's kind of unfortunate. But yeah, I think budgetary constraints really messed us up for you, Jerome, in terms of when they had that big reveal at the end.
Yeah, I think that you really see the issues with the way the creature looks, and just that design fundamentally does not work. I think the other issue for me, in terms of the budget, I don't know, issue's probably the wrong word, but I think it says a lot that there are logically hundreds of people on this boat, and every single person except for like 4 people are murdered by the creature, and then we go into that room with all the skeletons where they're all dead. But clearly you have the budget issues because, like, if you watch a disaster movie like the Poseidon Adventure, like, there's a lot of living people on that boat after the disaster happens, and then slowly they start dying. But in this movie, everybody just gets straight up murdered by the creature, except, again, for the most important characters in this movie. So I think that says a lot. I think that says a lot about where they were at in terms of budget, but I still think it works for the most part. Like, it does feel like they are actually in a boat for the most part, even though logically they're probably on a soundstage. But I think the production design of this movie is very strong. You always feel like they are in the place, which, again, is something weird to say to compliment, but I watch so many movies and TV shows where it feels like they're not in an actual place. But yeah, I was pretty impressed, honestly, with what I saw here. And if nothing else, I think this movie, again, is just really fun. And I like the 1 hour and 46 minute. I could make the argument it would be even better at like 95 minutes, but I think a movie like this should be 1 hour and 46 minutes. It should not be 2 hours and 5, not 2:10. I think 1 hour, 45 minutes, I think, is just about perfect. And yeah, again, we could talk about the performances all day long, but would you want to talk about our guy, Digimon Hansu?
That's right. I forgot. So he's in this movie as one of the mercenaries, and God knows how many times we've reviewed movies with him in it. I feel like every year since this podcast started, it's been 1 or 2 movies with him in it. And I feel like we always bounce around Amistad, and we're just never going to review Amistad.
With good reason. With good reason. I'll point that out.
So yeah, it's so weird that he keeps popping up, and like, I mean, we just saw him. Look, I did see Shazam 2, but he has, the cameo as the Great Wizard in Shazam 2 or whatever. So he's part of the DC universe still, and the MCU. So there's like all these connections to him, and he was here as a bad guy, so I wasn't used to that. But he actually gets it early, and he doesn't get killed by the creature, which is weird. But unfortunately, he gets an axe to the face. Spoiler alert, but man, again,
all I'm gonna say is this is one of those movies where the minority characters bite it pretty early in the first half. Like, they clearly set up all these characters, and if you are a brown person, or if you're a black person, or if you're an Asian person, you're probably gonna go first, and that is exactly what happens, unfortunately. So just know that going in, and it's something that you almost have to accept, or you're not going to get any enjoyment out of this movie.
We also have to throw Australians in there because Kano, the guy who plays Kano, is also in this movie as a mercenary. So there's a lot of great casting going on, because I feel like the mercenary cast is great. Even is it Trevor Goddard? No, Clifton Powell, I think his name is. But he's basically, if you see Next Friday, he's Pinky, the guy that owns the CD store. So I was just like, oh my God, it's Pinky. Like, I've never seen Pinky as like a badass. So that was like, dude, Pinky's a badass? Like, what is going on here? So again, the casting was pretty fun. Wes Studi, I mean, come on. I mean, he's he's Sagat. He's always this badass. He's typecasted, unfortunately. But in a role like this, I mean, no typecast needed, because he was just a badass mercenary leader who probably doesn't follow the rules all too well. But he ended up being the Quint of this movie, because the way he goes down is the same way.
Yes,
Quint.
I would say so. I also think they're kind of going for a Predator vibe in terms of casting this entire like elite unit of not military but like a paramilitary group, like the best of the best, and then they all succumb to this creature, even though they have all this modern weaponry. So I think there's a little bit of Predator in this movie, and I'm a huge fan of it. So yeah, I that's also something that I was making a connection to. Again, this movie in a lot of ways is taking pieces of other movies and kind of putting it together, but for the most part, I think it works out. And I mean, I think the way that this movie starts, even I think, is just perfect because we immediately figure out the type of person that John Finnegan is. He's playing solitaire on the little monitor, and he's driving around in his hunk of junk, and he's being very sarcastic. And again, Han Solo, but also Bill Pullman from Spaceballs too. Like, I could see it. There is a universe where Treat Williams is the president in Independence Day. Like, I definitely see a lot of similarities between Treat Williams and Bill Pullman. So I couldn't help but make that connection as well. But again, Treat Williams knows exactly what kind of movie he's in, doing this pseudo Han Solo, again, pseudo Spaceballs kind of thing. And I think it works out. I think he's really funny. I think he's really charming. And again, I think Treat Williams is super underrated. Like, he's not, like, he doesn't even have like a big time role that I could point to and be like, yes, this is the definitive Treat Williams role. And it just sucks, man. Like, it really sucks that, we don't have that definitive role. But I do have to say that the thing that impresses me the most about this movie is the fact that Treat Williams is treated, pun not intended, like the biggest star in the movie. So yeah, this is probably the closest thing to a definitive Treat Williams role, and it's just unfortunate that it isn't a movie that did not do very well. I guess if you want to make the argument, like, he plays the villain in The Phantom, but again, The Phantom is also not a movie that did very well. So yeah, there's that part of it too.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. Plus, he recently passed away. But seeing him in this role, it made me think like he could have had so many different. Like, we talk about the multiverse. You know what I mean? Like, he could have been Nathan Drake in Uncharted to me. And if they made it, if they didn't wait to make it so long, if you just waited after the first game back in 2008 or whatever and just do it in like 2011, he would have been perfect for that older Nathan Drake that I wanted instead of the younger Nathan Drake. So I totally picture him, because especially when there's the shot of him with that shotgun and on his back. That is total, like, I feel like I saw that in Uncharted. You know what I mean? The way Nathan Drake has that shotgun on his back. And I know it's a trope when you have that look and the shotgun on your back, but it looked like Uncharted, man. I was like, God, this guy would have been perfect. So yeah, I mean, this performance, I mean, it's fun. It's not the greatest thing ever, but he knows he's having fun, and the whole thing he's having fun with it. So it opens with, this giant luxury ship in the China Sea, big party going on. And I think what really helps is that they got, what, 300 something people on, the big set that they built to actually give it the size and scale, to make it seem like there's hundreds of people on a ship. So when they do disappear, it's like, what the fuck is going on? Because I thought, like, okay, what is going on here? Did they fuck up? Did they just forget that there was 300 people on the ship and just assume that we're going to cut down the victim list to like 50 people or something, and just assume there was only 50 people instead of 300 people? But no, they acknowledge it. Like, they find that room at the end that there's all these bodies there. So they make it like a logical thing as to how these people just start disappearing. And what's actually going on is that the monster is sucking them whole, and then they're melting inside until the bones are just bare, and they spit the bones out, and it's very like like a snake worm type thing, but it's really a squid. It's really just a giant squid with extra feeding worm-like tentacles at the end, and that's kind of where I was like, oh, they kind of got that from Tremors. And I know this whole giant octopus thing has been around forever, but we know an octopus doesn't have those external worm-like tentacles that also have feeding, teeth or whatever. So I like the idea. It's just that we don't fully realize it till the end. And the audience doesn't even know how many creatures there are, because they keep saying, like, they're everywhere. It's multiple of them. But it turns out it's just the one giant creature. So that was really confusing, especially in the beginning, because it felt like, oh, what the fuck just hit the boat? Like, the boat is fucking huge. So when this giant thing hits it, everyone feels it. It feels like an earthquake. So the whole mystery starts kind of like, what is going on? So I guess the fact that they don't reveal the monster, obviously, is the smart move, which is the smart move in a lot of creature features. But in this case, it added to the mystery part of the first half of the movie before they kind of fully reveal what's going on. But I did like the mystery aspect to it, because they don't really show the tentacles at all, especially as the first major murder in the bathroom, which I texted Jerome and I was just like, God, that was so brutal because she got sucked into a fucking toilet, man, and God, the body is just gonna crumble under that kind of pressure and just the bones breaking. Like, oh, so there's that kind of like body horror kind of going on in this movie. I think what they did was, okay, we can't afford to show the monster too much. We know the CGI is going to kind of make it maybe too much of a laughing stock. We can't show it in the CGI too much. But what we can show is practical gory effects, which they did well. Like blood is all over this movie, so that kind of gives you that R rating. But at the beginning, like it shows you like all the brutal deaths that in the beginning, the crew and like all the guests of the party. So that's where I was like, okay, I'm on board. Like there, I know the monster's not going to probably be 100% looking good, but the gore factor they stepped up, which I appreciate because I think that, you know, it kind of counterbalances that. So once this goes down, we see the mercenaries on the boat with Treat Williams, and it's like, what's going on? And we find out that these mercenaries are, renting the services of Treat Williams and his crew just to get to a certain location in the South China Sea. And the crew's like snooping around, and they find these missiles, and it's like, what are you doing with these missiles? Like, we're not telling you shit. Just take us where we need to go. And as they do that, they hit a boat, and this boat fell off the luxury liner when, the creature hit the thing. So everyone's like, what the fuck? Where's this boat coming from? It's just an empty boat that we just ran over. What's going on? They see the ship, and then the mercenaries are just kind of thinking like, hey, that's the ship that we're supposed to take over and get off. Like, we're paid to go and take the ship down. So basically the spoiler is like the person at the beginning of the movie who owns the ship is like, he wants the insurance money. It's that trope. So he hires mercenaries to take over the boat, safely get the passengers off board, and then sink the boat, which is nuts because, okay, so they have eight actual torpedoes with them that can cause serious damage. But it only took one to actually blow up the boat at the end. So I kept thinking, like, what were they going to do with the other seven if they only needed one to blow up the boat? So it was just one of those things, like, they really went over the top with that missile thing because, like, goddamn, they did not need 8 missiles to blow up that boat. They just needed one. So it was just going to throw me off. Like, is this a bigger plot that's going on? Are these nuclear weapons? What is going on here? And it was more of a MacGuffin. So in terms of that, once you get that passed out of the way, it kind of focuses on the monster. Because at that point, it's like, it doesn't matter what, this plan was. Everyone's on the boat trying to get off now, alive. And that's kind of the point. So the mercenaries are just freaking out, getting picked off one by one. And this is where your Predator thing comes in, because I thought the same thing. I thought of like the dude in Predator who was like painting himself up and just going in the middle and just screaming, and then the Predator gets him. Because you kind of got that with Kano. I'm going to keep calling him Kano. But man, just once you realize that these guys are just going to get knocked off one by one, I think the movie has this drastic change in tone. And then poor what's his name? Digimon Hansu gets the axe to the face.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. I think this is a movie that, again, I think is perfectly calibrated. It's not a movie that takes itself too seriously, but there are still some good scares, some good creature moments, and I think that's really all you can ask for out of a movie like this. I think this is the type of movie that people would probably appreciate more now, because it does have a sense of humor about itself, and it really feels like so many movies now don't have that sense of humor. And this is not a Meg 2 podcast, but Brian and I disagree a bit on it. And I think one of the problems that I have with the Meg 2 is that it takes itself way too goddamn seriously. And I compare it to this, and to me, this is so much more fun. Like, this is a much easier watch because the actors are having fun. There's some good laughs. Like you mentioned, the so many missiles. The sequence where they're shooting machine guns is just obscenely absurd, and just the way the Treat Williams responds to them shooting the guns. I think this movie is just a lot of fun, and it's a relatively easy watch, but it also does have some pretty grisly moments as well. And yeah, I think Stephen Sommers is exactly the type of director that we need. I think we need more directors like this who have a sensibility of, yes, we're going to make a creature feature, we're going to perhaps make a horror movie, but we're also going to live in a world where we can have some fun too. And I think that's what Deep Rising, The Mummy, and The Mummy Returns all do extremely well, is maintain the both tones really well. So yeah, I'm not sure if we're going to get a big Stephen Sommers comeback at any point, but it's because if you look at his most recent outings, you look at the Van Helsings, The Mummy 3, and G.I. Joe: The Rise of the Cobra. I'm not sure if we're ever going to get the Stephen Sommers comeback, but I would definitely like to see him take a step back and do something like this as opposed to doing like another franchise movie, because again, I think we need more movies like this that are able to have fun. And in a world where superhero movies are not the be all end all, I hope space can be opened up for something like this.
For sure. And I wanted to mention too, it's not just Treat Williams doing the comedy in this. I think Kevin J. O'Connor as Joey. Kevin J. O'Connor was that annoying guy Benny in The Mummy, and I think in this role, like he's perfectly casted for what like the clothing too is because he looks like he's Triple H or the dude who sang the lead song on the DX song at WrestleMania 14. Like he looks like that grunge dude, and it's perfect for 1998. And he's doing all these one-liners and these stupid jokes, and I would say about 80% hit, and the other 20% are annoying. But then once that other 20% doesn't hit, there's like another line after that to kind of counter that to make it seem like it was just an annoying line. So I loved like his one-liners here and there. So um, yeah, I really enjoyed that, and yeah, it sucks that his girlfriend died, and you mentioned the minority thing, and I don't know, man, that sucked. It just like you could have just had her live. Why? But movie rules in the '90s, I guess, and yeah, so basically all the minorities die in this movie, which is like, wow, wow, they just went with that because the last remaining three are Treat Williams, Famke Janssen, and Kevin J. O'Connor. But yeah, it sucks, man, because eventually they figure out, okay, we just got to get off the boat, and maybe we can use a missile and then blow up the boat, and then they blow up the boat with the creature inside. Not that crazy of an ending. I mean, it's very much inspired by like a Jaws or whatever. But I would say the highlight of it is definitely Wes Studi doing this Quint-like death sequence where it, like, Quint and Jaws slowly goes into Bruce's mouth and then gets pointed at that angle, and it gets slowly sucked into the mouth on an angle. In this case, it's very similar. And in this case, Kevin J. O'Connor, Joey, gives him a gun on the way out to shoot himself, you know what I mean, to end the pain. But there was no bullets left. So he just goes down in pain and he's screaming. So that was a tremendous, tremendous delivery of pain by Wes Studi. But credit to him, because like that role could have been as cheesy as fuck by another person, but he took it at the right serious tone, not too serious, but at the right tone where it's like when shit goes down and shit hits the fan, it's like you see his reaction too, and it's like, okay, we got to get the fuck out of here. We can't fuck around with this mercenary shit anymore. We got to get off the boat, kind of thing. So I was really impressed with his performance, and also Jason Fleming as well. He's the guy that gets the whole speech in the kitchen once you see that scene. But he's actually Dr. Jekyll in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I don't know if you noticed that, but I noticed that, and I was like, oh, that's great. Like, I'm glad to see him again, because I think he's an underrated actor. I've seen him in other stuff. I think I saw him in Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg as the lead singer of the band that Mark Wahlberg replaces. So, again, this cast is like really, kind of deep in terms of the character actors. So I wanted to mention them as well. I mean, they get it. Obviously, they get killed, but they get killed in like kind of fun ways, and you get like movie trope type speeches out of Jason Fleming about making a last stand or whatever. And then, of course, while he's saying that, the creature slowly comes up behind him, kind of thing. So that's kind of good horror fun that they had with these kind of kills, similar in a way to Predator. So I'll give it that. Even though I'm not the biggest Predator 1 fan, which is something we can get into possibly at a later date, but because I'm a big Predator 2 fan, more so than 1. But yeah, they blow up the guy. They blow up the big tentacle monster at the end. And here's where the ending kind of threw you off, because when I told you this, you were in shock, right? So where do they land? They land on this island. They think they're safe. They hear this giant roar, and you see the camera pan back, and there's this volcano in the background, and it cuts to black. Now, what did you think at that point, Jerome? Did you think there was like some kind of sequel coming, or what did you think before I
mean,
told
it
you the King Kong
definitely
thing?
teases a sequel. And when you said the Skull Island thing, I think it made a lot of sense. But ultimately, Like you knew it probably wasn't ever going to happen. So it was surprising, but not totally shocking in the way that they ended it. It's a neat little twist, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So I almost would have preferred if they had just not ended up on an island, ready to possibly have to deal with King Kong. Because again, that's something that is never going to pay off. There will never be a sequel to this movie. There will never even be a legacy sequel because it just wasn't that popular. It doesn't really seem to even have cult status. So it's a cute ending in theory, but again, just like with so many other movies, the T sequels that don't get them, like if you don't have the sequel to the cute ending, then it kind of nullifies the effect, in my view. So that's kind of where I land on it. But I think everything leading up to the ending was still really fun.
Yeah, I agree. I was just kind of in shock when I read that, and it made me like put the movie on the list, to be honest, because like when I was doing kind of the research of what movies to pick, I think this is the one I made an audible on. Like originally, we were going to review The Fly as part of the four, but then once I was doing research on this movie, I was like, God, this seems like a fun movie to review, especially reading that kind of King Kong tie-in at the end. So I made an audible, man, and I put this on the list, this of The Fly, and I kind of don't regret it because this turned out to be a fun watch. So in terms of like the strengths, I mean Jerry Goldsmith did actually a good job on the score. Um, I wish it was more of the score that because at the beginning there's this theme that is playing when the boat is moving, and I wish we had more of that theme because it sounds very like 80s, like I don't know, almost like a WCW instrumental type theme from the early 90s that you kind of like not bob your head to kind of thing. And then they kind of went with it, and then after that kind of went to a traditional score. But overall, I think Jerry Goldsmith had a fun job on this score, and I love the whole mystery aspect to it before the big reveal. I like the whole aspect of like what is making because they have to rely on sound, you have to rely on heavy like pieces of metal getting dense all of a sudden and having fun with that kind of thing and blood squirting everywhere. So I like the mystery aspect of the movie. And of course, I like the casting and I like the script. But of course, the weaknesses come in where the effects don't hold up well because of the budget. And of course, the creature design we mentioned not being fully thought out because clearly, like they wanted to have a tentacle monster, but then they had to like fill in these gaps. Like, okay, do we have smaller creatures? Is it just going to be part of just one giant creature? And once you start seeing the reveal of everything, it kind of still doesn't make sense. It's like, how is he here and over there at the same time? Is there two monsters? They never explained that. You know what I mean? The boat just blows up.
I think that is ultimately the cardinal sin of this movie because the issue is you don't have any big stars. So if you don't have any big stars, then to me you're going to rely on the creature selling it, and you don't really have a creature. So thus you don't really have a movie. Like you think about the most recent Godzilla movies. Like, it doesn't matter that Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen are in the movie. Like, Godzilla is going to sell it. The movie that we're discussing next week, also a Godzilla movie. Like, it doesn't matter who is in it because you're putting Godzilla on the poster. So Godzilla is the star of the movie. So in this case, because you don't really have a creature, therefore you don't really have something to sell the movie. Because as much as I enjoy Treat Williams in this movie, as much as I enjoy some of the other people in this movie, they are not going to put butts in seats, unfortunately. So that's what leads to the failure. I think the lack of a creature design, either in camera effects or post-production, that is the cardinal sin. I think the effects not holding up and the killing of the minorities, certainly flaws, but the creature design is what makes this movie not a classic. It is also why the movie doesn't do well at all.
Yeah, I would say it's a 7 out of 10. Like it's on the same level as like Alligator for me, but I feel like Alligator is probably the overall better movie. But I think you're gonna get more smiles and laughs out of this one. Like that's kind of where I'm at on it, and that's fine. Like you mentioned, like a B movie is not a bad thing. It's like it's a genre movie. It's designed to do certain things, and unfortunately, like this had high marks on certain areas, but it just didn't have high marks on the creature design, which is unfortunate because I felt like if they would have just took the time and maybe did some practical stuff to make it seem more realistic in real life, I think this would have been more of a in terms of a Tremors. You know what I mean? It's a level below a Tremors for me, but still like a
I would
solid
say
watch.
that's, yeah.
Solid
I
watch for
think
sure.
I think this and Tremors is actually a really fun double feature because I think they do very similar things. But I think the thing about Tremors is those creatures are very well realized. And I think with a movie like that, I would assume that you could put Kevin Bacon on the poster and be able to sell some tickets, even though I also know Tremors wasn't a huge hit. But I think that movie is much more in the consciousness because of the various sequels and because Kevin Bacon has gone on to become an even bigger star. So I think that movie has a little bit more going for it. And again, I think it's unfortunate that a movie like this also, like the fact that this is owned by Disney is a Hollywood picture, like that is also something that is hurting it because this isn't getting the kind of repertory screenings that other creature features are getting. So that hurts too. But I think this is really entertaining, and Jerry Goldsmith is somebody that we've talked about quite a bit. I think he's the kind of composer that we are missing these days. We don't have a lot of classical composers, and it's really unfortunate because Jerry Goldsmith is absolutely prolific in terms of like he's done everything from Supergirl to Star Trek to something like this. Like he's done big movies, he's done small movies. He is just a prolific composer, somebody that I've always been impressed with. But in this recent run of movies that I've been watching, like watching the Star Treks, watching this, I'm just all the more impressed by what he does.
For sure. I loved his like I mentioned, I love that opening whatever track with the boat at the beginning. I just love that little thing, and it's only 2 minutes, but I played it on loop for a good 10 right after the movie. So, yeah, credit to Jerry Goldsmith for sure. And my MVP is actually Treat Williams because I feel like I don't know he's like the glue to this movie. If he's not in this movie, it kind of falls apart in my opinion. Like you'll still have the great character actors, but you're not going to have that fun great lead. So to me, he's the MVP. As much as like I wanted to say Stephen Sommers, but I mean, he like this movie could have easily been way worse. Like easily been way worse if it wasn't for Treat Williams. So he's my MVP and a best performance.
I would say so. I mean, I don't think it's particularly close in this case, and that's not to say the other performances aren't good. But if Treat Williams is bad, or if you have somebody else that is in this role and it's bad, like the movie just is going to be a failure. Like it's going to be a 4 or 5 out of 10 as opposed to a 7. Treat Williams is easily worth 2 to 3 points.
Definitely. And that kind of wraps up our discussion for Deep Rising. I would highly recommend checking it out first. It's available on Amazon Prime right now for rental because of, again, the Hollywood picture movies seems to not be on streaming when they probably should be on Hulu. But that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, this was a fun watch. And now we have the big main event for next week. And Jerome, you've been talking about it. You've been mentioning it to me. You said we can do Creature Feature Month as long as we review Shin Godzilla. And I promise you, oh, hell yeah, we'll do that. So the big main event next week, Shin Godzilla from 2016. And I guess this is by default Jerome's favorite Godzilla movie. Spoiler alert. But we'll talk about that next week because this movie is totally different than any other monster movie I've ever seen. In fact, it's probably better than most like tentpole movies that I've seen in the last couple of years. And this movie came out in 2016, and they did it on a budget of $15 million. So that's all I can say. It's very well done. I think Aaron Sorkin would love this movie, and that's all I can say about it. Are you excited for next week?
I'm extremely excited for next week, and I'm very much looking forward to getting into, discussions of Godzilla as a character overall, but also getting into how different this movie is compared to some of the other creature feature movies that we've done. And that's what we have to look forward to.
That's for sure. All right, I'm Brian. That's Jerome. We'll talk to you again next week.
So I guess in this case, Brian, we didn't need a bigger boat.